I thought marrying him would save me. That's what Elena whispered to herself as the car swerved violently around another corner. Tires screaming against asphalt. Blood ran warm down her temple, pooling in the hollow of her collarbone. Through the rear-view mirror, she could see the driver's knuckles white against the steering wheel. His jaw clenched so tight, she thought his teeth might shatter. "Stay down," he barked. But Elena was already pressed against the leather seats, her designer dress, the one Marcus had bought her just last week, now torn and stained crimson. Sirens wailed somewhere behind them, growing closer, then fading, then closer again. The sound made her stomach twist into knots. She closed her eyes and saw Marcus's face. Not the face he wore now, cold, calculating, dangerous, but the one from their wedding day, gentle, almost boring in its predictability. The face of a man who read financial reports before bed and took his coffee black with exactly one sugar cube. The car lurched again. Elena's head cracked against the window. I said stay down. But how had it come to this? How had the man who promised her safety become the very thing she needed saving from? 3 months earlier, Elena Vasquez had been a different woman entirely. She'd been terrified, yes, but in a way that felt manageable, survivable. She'd witnessed something she shouldn't have. A transaction in a parking garage, money exchange, a man's face she recognized from the news being shoved into an unmarked van, and suddenly her quiet life as a financial analyst had exploded into chaos. The first threat came via email. Simple, direct. "We know what you saw." The second came when she found her apartment door ajar, her belongings rifled through, a single photograph left on her pillow. It was her, leaving work, circled in red marker. Elena had gone to the police. They'd been sympathetic, but ultimately useless. Without concrete evidence of a crime, there's not much we can do. Be vigilant. Consider staying with friends. She had no friends. Not really. Her parents were dead. Her brother lived in Portugal with a family of his own. Elena had always been self-sufficient, had always prided herself on needing no one. That pride felt foolish now. The third threat wasn't a threat at all. It was action. Someone tried to run her off the road on her morning commute. Her car had spun out, crashed through a guardrail, and come to rest inches from a 50-foot drop. She'd crawled out shaking, covered in glass, and known with absolute certainty that she was going to die. That's when Marcus appeared. She'd been sitting in a hospital waiting room, wrapped in a thin blanket, giving her statement to a skeptical police officer who seemed more interested in whether she'd been drinking than in the black SUV that had forced her off the highway. "Ms. Vasquez." Elena looked up. The man standing before her was tall, dressed in an immaculate charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His hair was dark, touched with gray at the temples, and his eyes were the color of slate, calm, measured, unreadable. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" she asked. "No, but I know what happened to you today, and I know it wasn't an accident." He glanced at the police officer, who had suddenly found somewhere else to be. "My name is Marcus Calloway. I'd like to help you." Elena should have been suspicious. She should have asked questions. But exhaustion and fear had worn her down to nothing, and this man, this stranger, spoke with such certainty, such confidence, that she found herself nodding. "How?" she whispered. Marcus sat down beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "The people after you are dangerous, well-connected. They won't stop until they're certain you can't talk." He paused, letting that sink in. "But if you were under my protection, they'd reconsider." "Your protection? Are you a lawyer? Private security?" "Something like that." His smile was small, almost apologetic. "I'm a businessman with certain resources and connections of my own. If you were associated with me, publicly and permanently, it would complicate things for them significantly." Elena's head was pounding. Associated how? Marcus looked directly at her, and for the first time she saw something almost vulnerable in his expression. "Marry me?" The words hung in the air between them like smoke. "You're insane," Elena said flatly. "Perhaps, but I'm also right. A marriage creates legal protections. It makes you part of a unit they can't touch without significant risk. And more importantly," he leaned forward slightly, "I can keep you alive. You don't even know me. I know enough. You're intelligent. You're alone. And you're in danger through no fault of your own. Marcus stood, straightening his cufflinks with practiced precision. I'm not asking you to love me, Ms. Vasquez. I'm offering you a transaction. Safety in exchange for discretion. You stay quiet about whatever you saw, and I ensure you live long enough to enjoy that silence. Elena wanted to laugh. It was absurd. People didn't actually do things like this. Did they? Marry strangers for protection like characters in some noir thriller? But then she remembered the photograph on her pillow. The car spinning out of control. The certainty of death. How long? She heard herself ask. A year. After that, we divorce quietly. You walk away with enough money to start fresh anywhere in the world. And if I say no? Marcus's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Then I wish you the best of luck, Ms. Vasquez. You'll need it. He left his card on the chair beside her and walked away. Elena stared at it for a long time. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, no title or company name. Just a name and a number. She went home that night to her violated apartment and couldn't sleep. Every shadow seemed menacing. Every sound made her heart race. At 3 a.m., she called the number. Marcus answered on the first ring, his voice clear and alert despite the hour. Yes. Okay, Elena whispered. I'll do it. The wedding happened within a week. It was a small, sterile affair in the judge's chambers. Marcus wore another expensive suit. Elena wore a cream-colored dress she'd bought the day before, still creased from the shopping bag. There were 2 witnesses. People Marcus knew, their faces bland and forgettable, and the whole thing took less than 15 minutes. When the judge pronounced them married, Marcus kissed her cheek with the warmth of a business handshake. Welcome to safety, he murmured. Marcus's home was a revelation. Elena had expected something cold and modern, all glass and steel edges. Instead, she found herself standing in the foyer of a sprawling estate that looked like it belonged to old money. Persian rugs, crown molding, artwork that might have been original but probably wasn't. Your room is upstairs, second door on the left, Marcus said, setting her single suitcase down. You'll have privacy. I travel frequently for business, so you'll often have a house to yourself. What kind of business? Elena asked. Import-export, consulting, investments. His answer was smooth, rehearsed. Nothing you need to concern yourself with. Your only job now is to settle in and be safe. And for the first few weeks, that's exactly what happened. Elena settled in. The house was enormous, far too large for 2 people. Marcus was gone more than he was present, leaving before dawn and returning after dark. When he was home, he was unfailingly polite but distant. They ate dinner together occasionally, meals prepared by a chef who came and went like a ghost, and made stilted conversation about nothing of importance. How was your day? Elena would ask. Productive, Marcus would reply. And yours? Quiet. It was like living with a very courteous stranger who happened to share her last name. But slowly, Elena began to notice things. The guards, for instance. She'd expected some level of security. Marcus had promised protection, after all. But there seemed to be an unusual number of men in dark suits patrolling the grounds. She counted at least 6 on a regular rotation, maybe more. They never spoke to her, never made eye contact, just moved through property like wraiths. Then there were the locked rooms. The house had 3 floors, and Elena had free access to most of it. But there was an entire wing on the 3rd floor that remained perpetually locked. She tried the doors once out of curiosity and found them sealed tight, requiring what looked like biometric access. What's up there? She'd asked Marcus over dinner one night. He looked up from his salmon. Expression mild. Storage. Old files from the business. Nothing interesting. Then why lock it? Habit. I don't like people going through my things. He smiled, and it almost reached his eyes. I'm sure you understand the value of privacy. Elena. She did. But that didn't stop her from wondering. The burner phones were harder to explain away. She'd found the first one in a drawer in the kitchen while looking for a corkscrew. It was cheap plastic, the kind you bought at convenience stores. She'd mentioned it casually to Marcus. Oh, that's for when I travel to certain countries, he'd said without missing a beat. Service can be unreliable. Better to have a local option. It made sense. Sort of. But then she found 3 more, hidden in various places around the house. That didn't make sense at all. Marcus had an explanation for everything, delivered with such calm certainty that Elena found herself accepting his words even when her instincts screamed otherwise. He knew things before they happened. Which stocks to buy, which restaurants were about to close health code violations, which routes to avoid because of traffic that hadn't been reported yet. Lucky guesses, he'd say with a self-deprecating shrug. But luck didn't explain how he knew about the fire at her old apartment building before it made the news, or how he'd known her former co-worker was about to be arrested for embezzlement 2 days before the police showed up. "I pay attention," Marcus told her when she pressed. "I listen to what people say. Connect dots they don't see. It's a skill you develop in business." Elena wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. Because in between the strange observations and unexplained knowledge, Marcus was kind to her. He bought her books she mentioned wanting to read. He remembered she liked lavender tea and made sure the kitchen was always stocked. When she had a nightmare about the car accident, he knocked softly on her door and offered to sit with her until she fell back asleep. "You're safe here," he'd said, his voice gentle in the darkness. "I promise you that, Elena. Whatever else happens, you're safe." And she believed him. In that moment, sitting in the quiet house with this strange, careful man, she'd actually believe him. The shift happened gradually. Fear gave way to comfort. Comfort gave way to something warmer. Elena found herself looking forward to evenings when Marcus was home, to their quiet dinners and increasingly less stilted conversations. He was smart, well-read, surprisingly funny when he let his guard down. "Why did you really offer to help me?" she asked him one night over wine. Marcus considered the question, swirling his glass thoughtfully. "I suppose I saw someone who deserved better than what they were getting, and I was in a position to help. That's rare enough to be worth acting on. That's very noble. Is it—" He looked at her with those unreadable eyes. "Or is it selfish? I get a companion. Someone to share this absurd house with. Someone who doesn't want anything from me except safety. Is that what I am? A companion? I'm not sure what you are yet. Elena." His voice was soft. "But I'm glad you're here." That night, she lay awake thinking about the way he looked at her. Like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. Like she mattered. The scream shattered everything. It was 3 a.m. Elena had been asleep, dreaming about nothing important, when a sound jolted her awake. High-pitched, anguished, abruptly cut short. It came from the 3rd floor. She sat up in bed, heart hammering. The house was silent now, but she knew what she'd heard. Someone had screamed. Someone was up there in those locked rooms. Elena waited for Marcus to appear, to explain, to offer one of his smooth rationalizations. But the house remained dark and quiet. His bedroom door down the hall didn't open. She got out of bed, pulled on a robe, and crept into the hallway. The guard's rotation had changed recently. She knew there was a blind spot near the 3rd floor staircase between 3 and 4 a.m. If she was quick, the stairs creaked under her bare feet. Elena held her breath, expecting alarms, shouts, hands grabbing her shoulders. Nothing happened. The 3rd floor was dark except for a thin line of light beneath one of the locked doors. She approached slowly, pressing her ear against the wood. Voices. 2 of them, maybe 3. One she recognized instantly. Marcus, speaking in a tone she'd never heard before. Cold, commanding. "I told you what would happen if you lied to me," he said. A whimper. Male voice, young, terrified. "Please, I swear I don't know anything else. I told you everything. Please." The sound of impact. Flesh on flesh. The whimper became a sob. "Search him again," Marcus ordered, "and check the accounts. If he's moved even $1, I want to know where." Elena backed away from the door, her whole body trembling. She'd heard violence before, seen it, even, in that parking garage, but hearing it in her home, delivered by the man who'd promised her safety, made her stomach turn to ice. She made it back to her room and sat on the edge of her bed, shaking. Her mind raced through possibilities, explanations, justifications. Maybe it was role play. Maybe was a movie playing on speakers. Maybe she'd imagined the whole thing, but she knew she hadn't. When morning came, Marcus appeared at breakfast exactly as he always did, calm, put together. He poured her coffee and asked if she'd slept well. Fine, Elena lied, watching his hands. The same hands that had touched her shoulder gently just yesterday. The same hands that had, hours ago, delivered violence to someone locked in a room above their heads. "You look tired," Marcus observed. "Bad dreams." He nodded sympathetically. "Understandable. You've been through a trauma. These things take time to process." He buttered his toast with precise, measured movements. "I have to travel today. Dubai. I'll be gone for 3 days. Will you be all right here?" "Of course." Elena's voice sounded strange to her own ears. "I'll be fine." Marcus studied her for a moment, and she saw something flicker across his face. Suspicion? Concern? It was gone too quickly to identify. "The guards will be here if you need anything," he said. "And Elena, please stay on the first 2 floors while I'm gone. The 3rd floor has some old wiring I'm concerned about. I wouldn't want you to get hurt." It wasn't a request. "Understood," she said. He kissed her forehead before he left, a gesture that had become almost routine, and Elena fought the urge to flinch away. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, she began searching. She started with his study, a room she'd been in before but never examined closely. The desk drawers were locked, but Elena had learned to pick simple locks from a college boyfriend who'd been into urban exploration. It took her 20 minutes and 2 bent hairpins, but she got them open. Inside, she found nothing useful. Business documents, contracts in languages she didn't recognize, financial statements for companies she'd never heard of. But then, in the very back of the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a stack of letterhead, she found a passport. Marcus's face stared up at her from the photo, but the name beneath it read, Daniel Morrison. Elena's hands shook as she kept digging. Another passport. Same face, different name, Michael Carver. And another, Robert Cashin. 4 passports. 4 identities. All him. She photographed everything with her phone, her mind reeling. Who was she married to? Who was Marcus Calloway, really? Did that name even exist? Or was it just another mask he wore? The offshore accounts were easier to find once she knew what she was looking for. Marcus, or whoever he was, had been careless, or perhaps he'd never expected her to look. Bank statements showed transfers of staggering amounts. Millions moving through shell corporations, bouncing between countries with lax financial regulations. But it was erased histories that chilled her most. She found a laptop in the back of his closet, hidden in a false bottom of a shoebox. It wasn't password protected. Why would it be when it was hidden so carefully? And what she found inside made her blood run cold. Files on dozens of people. Photos, addresses, financial records, family information. Background checks, so thorough they included childhood medical records and high school yearbook photos. And there, buried in a folder labeled Prospects, was a file on her. Elena Vasquez. Complete dossier dating back 5 years. Every job she'd held, every place she'd lived, every relationship she'd been in. Photos of her she didn't remember being taken. At the grocery store, leaving the gym, sitting in a coffee shop. The file was dated 3 years before they'd met. 3 years. He'd been watching her, studying her, long before the parking garage incident, long before the threats, long before he'd appeared in that hospital waiting room like some kind of savior. The room spun. Elena gripped the edge of the desk, forcing herself to breathe. The marriage hadn't been about protecting her. It had been about acquiring her. She'd been selected, groomed from afar, and when the opportunity presented itself, when she'd witnessed something that put her life in danger, he'd swooped in to claim her. But why? What possible value could she have to someone like this? She opened her own file, hands trembling, and began to read. And slowly, horribly, it started to make sense. Her position at the investment firm gave her access to client portfolios, high net worth individuals, corporate accounts, pension funds. She never thought her job as particularly important, but someone with the right knowledge could use that access for insider trading, money laundering, manipulation of markets. There were notes in Marcus's handwriting. Clean record. No close family ties. Isolated. Risk-averse personality suggests compliance once dependent. Proceed with acquisition plan. Acquisition plan. Elena was going to be sick. She barely made it to the bathroom before she vomited, her whole body shaking with the force of her horror and rage. She'd been so stupid, so desperately grateful for the safety he'd offered that she hadn't questioned the cost. When she could stand again, she washed her face and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked haunted, hollow-eyed, nothing like the confident analyst she'd been just months ago. But beneath the fear, something else burned. Anger. She went back to the study and kept searching. If Marcus had selected her so carefully, had plans for her, she needed to know what those plans were. And she needed to know what happened to people when Marcus Calloway, or whatever his real name was done with them. The answer was in another folder, this one buried deep in encrypted files that took her hours to crack. But Elena had always been good with computers, with patterns and codes. It's what made her valuable to Marcus in the first place. Inside, she found records of previous associates. Women, mostly, though there were a few men. Each had been chosen for specific skills or access. Each had been brought into Marcus's orbit through similar circumstances, vulnerability, danger, need, and each had disappeared after their usefulness expired. Some had deaths that looked like accidents, car crashes, house fires, drownings. Others had simply vanished, their files marked relocated, with no further information. Elena recognized one of the names. A woman who made the news 2 years ago. A whistleblower who disappeared before she could testify about financial crimes at a major corporation. Everyone had assumed she'd fled or been paid off. Elena photographed everything. Every file, every document, every piece of evidence she could find. She uploaded it all to a cloud storage account Marcus didn't know about, sent copies to 3 different email addresses, and encrypted everything she could. Then she called her brother. Elena? Paolo's voice was warm, confused. It's late there, isn't it? Is everything okay? No, she wanted to scream. Nothing is okay. I'm married to a monster, and I don't know how to escape without dying. But Marcus's guards were everywhere, and she had no doubt the phones were monitored. So instead she said, I'm fine. I miss you. I was thinking maybe I could visit next month. Of course. The kids would love to see you. But Elena, you sound strange. Are you sure everything's all right? Just tired. Long week. I'll call you soon to plan the trip. Okay? Okay. I love you, Manna. I love you too. She hung up before she started crying. Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat in her room with a chair wedged under the doorknob, useless against someone who really wanted in, but it made her feel fractionally safer, and tried to think. Running was suicide. Marcus had resources she couldn't begin to match. Going to the police was equally pointless. The files she'd found showed payments to law enforcement officials across 3 states. And even if she found someone clean, how would she explain being married to a man whose real identity she didn't even know? But staying meant becoming complicit. It meant being used for whatever Marcus had planned. It meant looking the other way while people suffered, while innocent lives were ruined or ended. It meant becoming someone she hated. When Marcus returned from Dubai 3 days later, Elena was waiting in the living room. She put everything back exactly as she'd found it, had practiced her smile in the mirror until it looked almost genuine. Welcome home, she said when he walked in, and she even stood to kiss his cheek like a proper wife. Marcus smiled, and for just a moment she thought she saw relief in his eyes. It's good to be back. I missed you. Did you? The question came out sharper than she intended. His smile faltered. Of course. This house is too quiet without you. They had dinner that night, and Elena played her part. She asked about Dubai, laughed at his stories, pretended everything was normal, and all the while her mind was racing, planning, calculating odds and risks. Because she'd realized something in those 3 days alone. If she was going to survive this, she couldn't run and she couldn't fight. She had to be smarter than that. She had to become exactly what Marcus thought she was, compliant, dependent, grateful. She had to make him trust her completely. And then, when he was most vulnerable, she'd destroy him. It was a long game, a dangerous game, but it was the only one she could see that didn't end with her disappearance marked relocated in someone's file. So Elena stayed, and she smiled, and she became Mrs. Marcus Calloway in every way that mattered, except in her heart where she plotted his downfall. The first test came 2 weeks later. Marcus came to her room late one evening, his expression serious. "I need your help with something." Elena looked up from her book. "Of course. What is it?" "There's a man I do business with. He's been stealing from me, and I need proof." Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, and she noticed he looked tired. "He banks with your old firm. I need access to his accounts." There it was, the reason he'd chosen her. Elena's mouth went dry. "Marcus, I don't work there anymore. I can't just... You still have your login credentials, don't you? Most companies don't deactivate immediately." He took her hand, his touch gentle. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. This man has taken millions from me, from us, as if they were really partners, as if she had any claim to his blood money. What happens to him?" Elena asked quietly. "After you have proof?" Marcus's eyes were steady. "That depends on what I find. But you don't need to worry about that part. All I need is the information." This was it, the moment where she became complicit or refused and faced the consequences. Elena thought about the files she'd found, the disappeared women, the careful plans Marcus made for people who were no longer useful. She thought about survival. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll try." The relief on Marcus's face was palpable. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, the first real kiss they'd shared since their wedding. "Thank you. You have no idea how much this means to me." But she did. She knew exactly what it meant. That night, Elena used her old credentials to access the firm's system. They worked. Marcus had been right about that. She pulled the account information for the man Marcus had named, a businessman she vaguely recognized from the news. What she found was damning. Transfers that clearly violated the terms of his investment agreements, money being siphoned off into private accounts, evidence of fraud that would send him to prison for years. She gave it all to Marcus. "Perfect," he said, scrolling through the documents she printed. "This is exactly what I needed." "What now?" Elena asked, even though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Now I make a call, have a conversation, and recover what's mine." Marcus looked at her with something like affection. "You've been incredibly helpful, Elena. I won't forget this." 2 days later, the businessman's body was found in his hotel room. Heart attack, the news said. Tragic, really, for a man so young. Elena knew better. She locked herself in the bathroom and threw up until there was nothing left, then sat on the cold tile floor and cried. She'd done this. Her help had killed that man as surely as if she'd injected the poison herself. When Marcus knocked on the door, his voice concerned, she pulled herself together. "I'm fine," she called out. "Just feeling sick. Something I ate. Can I get you anything?" "No, I just need to rest." She heard him hesitate, then walk away. And Elena sat there in the dark, feeling her humanity leak away like water through cupped hands. But she didn't run. She stayed. Because running meant dying, and dying meant Marcus won. The months that followed were a study in moral erosion. Marcus asked for small favors, each one slightly worse than the last. Information from her old firm. Introductions to people she knew. Small lies told to the right people at the right times. And Elena gave him what he wanted. Every single time. Because between the requests, Marcus was kind to her. He took her to dinners at restaurants where waiters knew his name. He bought her jewelry she never wore and dresses that hung unworn in her closet. He talked about the future like they had won, vacations they might take, houses they might buy, children they might have someday. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, Elena almost forgot what he was, almost let herself believe the fantasy. Then she'd remember the screaming, the disappeared women, the businessman who died because she'd helped. And the worst part? She was starting to understand Marcus, starting to see the logic in his ruthlessness, the necessity of his violence. When you lived in his world, sentiment was weakness, mercy was liability. The realization hit her one night as she helped him dispose of evidence, just documents, nothing worse than that, but still, she was shredding papers that could send someone to prison, and she wasn't even shaking anymore. "You're getting good at this," Marcus observed, watching her work. "Practice makes perfect," Elena said, and the bitterness in her voice was so familiar now it barely registered. Marcus crossed the room and turned her to face him. His hands were warm on her shoulders. "I know this isn't what you signed up for. I know you're struggling with it." "Am I?" Elena looked at him. This man she was married to, this stranger whose real name she still didn't know. "Because lately, it feels like I'm not struggling enough." "You're surviving. There's no shame in that." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture tender. "I chose you because I saw strength in you, Elena. I saw someone who could adapt, who could do what needed to be done. I wasn't wrong." "No," she whispered. "You weren't." And God help her, she meant it. That night, for the first time since their wedding, Elena went to Marcus's room instead of her own. She knocked softly, and when he answered, she didn't say anything, just looked at him until he understood. He pulled her inside, and they crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Afterward, lying in his arms in the dark, Elena felt something break open inside her chest. It might have been her heart. It might have been her soul. She wasn't sure she cared which. "I love you," Marcus whispered against her hair. Elena closed her eyes. "I know." She didn't say it back. Couldn't, because loving him would mean accepting what she'd become, and she wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she stayed in his bed that night, and the next, and the one after that. And slowly, inevitably, the distance between them collapsed. The lowest point came on a Tuesday. Elena was in the kitchen when Marcus received a call. She only heard his side of the conversation, but it was enough. "No, I was very clear about the timeline. I don't care about his family situation." Then he should have thought of that before he failed to handle it. He hung up and turned to find Elena watching him. "Problem?" she asked. Marcus hesitated, and she saw him weighing how much to tell her. Someone didn't hold up their end of a deal. It needs to be addressed. Addressed how? Elena. How, Marcus? He met her eyes. Permanently. There it was. Confirmation of what she'd suspected. What she'd known but never heard him admit. Marcus didn't just manipulate and scheme. He killed. Maybe not with his own hands. But the distinction felt meaningless. "Who is he?" Elena asked. "Does it matter?" "Yes." Marcus pulled up something on his phone and showed her. A photo of a man in his 40s, ordinary looking, smiling at the camera. "His name is David Chun. He was supposed to move some merchandise for me, but he's been skimming off the top. Worse, he's been talking to people he shouldn't talk to." "Does he have family?" "Wife. 2 kids. Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless. "They're irrelevant." But they weren't. Elena could see them in her mind. A woman who'd wake up one day to find her husband gone. Children who'd grow up with a hole in their lives they'd never understand. She could stop this. One phone call to police, one anonymous tip, and Davidson might survive the week. But Marcus would know. His connections ran deep. His reach was long. And if he knew Elena had betrayed him, that year-end divorce he'd promised would never happen. She'd just be another file marked relocated. "Elena." Marcus's voice was gentle, understanding. "You don't have to be involved in this. In fact, I'd prefer if you weren't. Go upstairs, take a bath, read your book. Forget you heard anything. It would be so easy to walk away, to maintain plausible deniability, to let someone else's husband die while she pretended ignorance." Elena stood there in her beautiful kitchen, in her beautiful house, next to a man she'd started to love despite everything. And she made a choice. "Wait," she said. Marcus turned. "Give him a chance to make it right. One chance. If he can return what he took, if he agrees to disappear and never talk." She swallowed hard. Wouldn't that be better? Less messy? It was a rationalization, a compromise with evil. But David Chin would live. His children would keep their father. And Elena could tell herself she'd done something good. Even as she sank deeper into complicity, Marcus considered this. He'd have to give back everything, plus interest, and he'd have to leave the country within 48 hours. That's fair. Fair. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. You still think in terms of fairness. After everything, you still think the world works that way. Maybe I'm stupid. No. He touched her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. You're not stupid. You're good. Better than me. Better than this whole fucked up situation. He pulled out his phone and made a call. It's me. Give Chin 24 hours to return everything with 20% interest. If he does, he walks. If he doesn't, proceed as planned. When he hung up, Elena felt like she might collapse. She'd saved a man's life. She'd also condemned him to exile, to running forever, to losing everything he'd built. Was that better? Was that good? She didn't know anymore. Marcus pulled her close, and Elena let him, because at least when he was holding her, she didn't have to look at herself. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For listening, for giving him a chance. Marcus kissed the top of her head. I'd do worse things than that for you. Elena, I hope you know that. She did. That was the problem. That night, lying awake while Marcus slept beside her, Elena realized she'd reached the bottom. She'd actively participated in Marcus's world. She'd helped him, advised him, advocated for mercy within his framework of violence. She'd become his partner. And the most terrifying part? It hadn't been that hard. The transition from victim to accomplice had been so gradual, so insidious, that she'd barely noticed it happening. Elena thought about the woman she'd been before all this. Principled, yet a bit isolated, ethical, even if naive. That woman felt like a stranger now. This is what Marcus had wanted all along. Not just her access or her skills, but her soul. He'd carefully, methodically broken her down and rebuilt her in his image. And she'd let him, because she was afraid, because she was tired, because somewhere along the way, survival had seemed more important than integrity. Elena got out of bed and went to the window. The estate stretched out below, beautiful and manicured and purchased with blood money. Guards patrolled the grounds. Cameras watched every angle. She was in a cage. A beautiful, comfortable cage, but a cage nonetheless. And the most horrible truth? Part of her didn't want to leave. Because leaving meant going back to being alone, being hunted, being afraid. Here, with Marcus, she was protected, cared for, loved in his own twisted way. Was safety worth? They'd been married for 8 months. 8 months of slowly descending into darkness, of compromises and moral flexibility, of learning to live with blood on her hands. Marcus had started talking about making the arrangement permanent. Why divorce? He'd ask over breakfast. We work well together. We could build something remarkable. And Elena, to her horror, had started to consider it. Then David Chin died. The news came across her phone as she was getting dressed. Businessman found dead in Mexico City hotel. Apparent suicide. He'd left a note apologizing to his family, saying he couldn't live with what he'd done. Elena knew immediately it was a lie. Chin had returned the money. Marcus had confirmed it himself, had seemed pleased that Elena's suggestion had worked. But apparently, letting him live had been too risky. Someone who'd stolen once might steal again. Someone who'd talked to the wrong people might talk again. So Marcus had given the order anyway. Elena found him in his study, reviewing documents like it was any other morning. You killed him, she said from the doorway. Marcus looked up, unsurprised. I did what was necessary. He gave back the money. He was leaving the country. You promised. I promised to give him a chance. He took it, but that doesn't change the fact that he was a liability. Marcus set down his pen, his expression patient. I let him say goodbye to his family. I made it look like suicide so they could collect his life insurance. I was more merciful than he deserved. Merciful? Elena's laugh was hollow. You killed an innocent man and you call that mercy. He wasn't innocent. And yes, given the alternative, it was mercy. Marcus stood, moving toward her. Elena, I know this is hard for you to understand. But in my world, loose ends don't stay loose for long. They become problems. problems become catastrophes. I eliminated a problem before it could become something worse. Your world. Elena felt something crystallize inside her, something sharp and cold. I'm so tired of your world, Marcus. I'm tired of being part of it. His expression shifted, became wary. What are you saying? I'm saying I want out. Divorce me. Give me the money you promised and let me go. Elena, please. Her voice broke. I can't do this anymore. I can't be this person. Every time I close my eyes, I see their faces. The businessman. Chun, how many others I don't even know about? And I helped you. I'm as guilty as you are. Marcus reached for her, but she stepped back. Don't touch me. Elena, listen to me. You're upset, I understand that. But you're not thinking clearly. If you leave, I'll keep my mouth shut. I'll disappear. You'll never hear from me again. Isn't that what you want? A clean ending. No. Marcus's voice was hard now, the gentleness gone. That's not what I want. What I want is for you to calm down and remember that we're in this together. You can't just walk away from what we've built. What we've built? You mean your criminal empire? I didn't build that, Marcus. You did. I was just collateral damage. You were my wife. The words came out loud, sharp. You are my wife. And you don't get to decide you're done just because your conscience is suddenly inconvenient. Elena stared at him, and for the first time since their wedding, she saw him clearly. Not the gentle protector, not the lonely businessman, not the complicated man she convinced herself she loved. Just a predator who'd gotten exactly what he wanted. I'm leaving, she said quietly. No, you're not. Marcus moved between her and the door. I've invested too much in you. We've come too far. You're upset, but you'll get over it. You always do. Let me leave, Marcus. Or what? You'll go to the police? He laughed, but it was ugly. Tell them what? That you helped me commit fraud, access private accounts, make people disappear? You're just as guilty as I am. Elena. More, even because you knew better. You had principles once. I just helped you see how useless they were. He was right. She was trapped, guilty, complicit, but she was also done. I'll find a way, Elena said. I'll expose you, even if it means destroying myself in the process. Marcus's expression went cold. You won't, because you're not brave enough. You proved that when you stayed, when you helped me, when you crawled into my bed. You're a survivor, Elena, not a martyr. And survivors don't throw their lives away on principle. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think. I know you better than you know yourself. He moved closer, and Elena forced herself not to retreat. I know you're scared. I know you hate what you've become. But I also know you won't leave. Because leaving means being alone again, being hunted again. And you'd rather be guilty and safe than innocent and dead. You're wrong. Am I? Marcus tilted his head, studying her. Then prove it. Walk out that door right now. I won't stop you. Let's see how far you get. It was a challenge, a dare, and Elena knew it was a trap. If she left now, with nothing but clothes on her back, she wouldn't survive a week. Marcus had too many connections, too many resources. He'd find her, and when he did, she'd join the other disappeared women in his files. But if she stayed, if she backed down from this, she'd never have the courage to try again. Elena thought about David Chen's children, growing up without their father. She thought about all the people Marcus had hurt, would continue to hurt. She thought about the woman she used to be, the one who believed in right and wrong. Then she thought about survival, about safety, about the cage she'd built for herself out of fear and compromise. I need time, she said finally. Time to think. Marcus's smile was victorious. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Elena, don't take too long. My patience has limits. He left her standing there, and Elena understood with perfect clarity that she'd just lost the only real chance she'd have to escape. She'd chosen safety over freedom. She'd chosen to stay in the cage. But she'd also bought herself time. And time, in the right hands, could be a weapon. Elena spent the next 3 weeks planning. She was careful, methodical, using every skill Marcus had taught her about misdirection and covering tracks. She created fake identities, opened an offshore account of her own, and slowly, carefully, began building an escape route. She copied more files, gathered more evidence, created a dossier on Marcus that would bury him if it ever saw daylight. And she waited for the right moment. It came when Marcus announced another trip. Hong Kong this time, 5 days, important meetings. He kissed her goodbye at the door, and Elena smiled and told him to be safe. The moment his plane took off, she moved. She withdrew cash from hidden accounts, packed a single bag, and copied all her evidence onto encrypted drives. Then she made a call to a journalist she researched obsessively, someone with a reputation for integrity, someone who couldn't be bought. "I have information about Marcus Calloway," she said when the journalist answered. "Information about fraud, money laundering, murder. Everything you'd need to bring him down. Someone who wants to do the right thing." Finally, Elena gave him an email address where he could reach her. "I'll send you everything, but I need something in exchange. I don't pay sources. I don't want money. I want witness protection. I want immunity. I want a guarantee that when this goes public, I won't go down with him." Another pause, longer this time. "I can't promise that, but I can put you in touch with people who might be able to help. If your information is as good as you say, it's better." Elena closed her eyes. "But you need to know, doing this will probably kill me. He'll come after me. He always finds people." "Then why do it?" Elena thought about David Chun, about the disappeared women, about the person she'd become in Marcus's shadow. "Because someone has to," she said, "and I owe it to everyone who can't." She sent the files that night. Every document, every photo, every piece of evidence she gathered. Enough to put Marcus away for several lifetimes. Then she ran. She made it 36 hours before they found her. Elena was in a motel outside Sacramento when the door burst open. Not police, not FBI. Marcus's people, moving with terrifying efficiency. She fought, but it was useless. They zip-tied her hands, threw a hood over her head, and dragged her to a car. And that's when everything went wrong. Police sirens, shouts, gunfire. The journalist had come through. He'd contacted the FBI. They'd been following her, waiting for Marcus's people to make a move. In the chaos, the car crashed. Elena's head cracked against something hard. Blood ran warm down her face. Someone grabbed her, pulled her from the wreckage, shoved her into another vehicle. And now here she was, bleeding in the back of a moving car. Sirens wailing, whispering words that felt like a prayer or a confession or both. "I thought marrying him would save me." The car stopped abruptly. The driver, one of Marcus's men, she recognized him vaguely, turned to look at her. "Boss wants to talk to you." He handed her a phone. Elena's hand shook as she lifted it to her ear. "Hello, wife." Marcus's voice was calm, almost amused. "Quite the mess you've made." "You killed innocent people," Elena said. Her voice was steady despite the blood, despite the fear. "You killed them, and you made me complicit. I couldn't let that continue. So you destroyed us both?" Very noble. There was rustling, like he was adjusting his position. "The FBI has enough to charge you as an accessory to everything I've done. You understand that, right? You helped me, Elena. Willingly. Repeatedly." "I know. And you did it anyway." "Yes." Marcus was silent for a long moment. "I underestimated you. I thought you'd choose safety. Choose survival. I did choose survival. Just not the kind you meant." Elena closed her eyes. "I chose to survive with my soul intact. Or what's left of it." How poetic. But there was something in his voice, not quite regret, but close. "You know I can't let you live. Not after this." "I know. But I can make it quick. Painless. That's more than I usually offer." The driver was watching her in the rearview mirror, waiting for Marcus's order. Elena thought about all the choices she'd made, all the compromises, all the moments she'd chosen safety over integrity. She thought about the woman she'd been, the woman she'd become, and the woman she might have been if she'd been braver from the start. Marcus, she said quietly, do you actually love me? Or was that just another lie? The silence stretched so long she thought he wouldn't answer. I love what you could have been, he said finally. What we could have built together. But you threw it away for nothing. For principle. For guilt. His voice hardened. Yes, Elena. It was a lie. All of it. Somehow, that hurt more than anything else. Goodbye, Marcus. She heard him take a breath. Then, goodbye, Elena. The driver reached for his gun, but he never got the chance to use it. The FBI had been tracking the phone call. They'd set up a roadblock half a mile ahead. When the driver saw it and tried to turn around, 3 black SUVs boxed him in. Elena was pulled from the car by federal agents. They read her rights, put her in handcuffs, and drove her to a facility where lawyers and investigators waited. The next 72 hours were a blur of interrogations, negotiations, testimony. Elena told them everything, showed them everything. The evidence she'd gathered, combined with her insider knowledge, was enough to dismantle Marcus's entire operation. In exchange for her cooperation, they offered her a deal: reduced charges, witness protection, a chance to start over somewhere far away. You'll have to testify, the prosecutor told her. You'll have to look him in the eye and tell the world what he is. I know, Elena said. I'm ready. But she wasn't. Not really. The trial took 9 months. Elena testified for 3 days, telling the jury about the marriages of convenience, the offshore accounts, the disappeared women, the murder she'd helped facilitate through her silence. Marcus sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, his face impassive. He never looked at her. Not once. When the verdict came back, guilty on all counts, Elena felt no relief, no victory, just a hollow emptiness where her life used to be. Marcus was sentenced to life without parole. As they led him away, he finally turned to look at her. Their eyes met across the courtroom, and in that moment, Elena saw something flicker in his expression. It might have been hatred. It might have been respect. It might have been love, in the only way someone like Marcus knew how to love. Then he was gone. 5 years later, Elena Vasquez, though that wasn't her name anymore, sat in a cafe in a small coastal town, watching tourists wander past her window. She had money, more than she'd need for several lifetimes. The government had let her keep a portion of what Marcus had given her, blood money transformed into a comfortable life through legal alchemy. She had safety, a new identity, a new history, a new chance. She had freedom, but she also had nightmares. Memories she couldn't escape, guilt that sat on her chest like a stone, making it hard to breathe some mornings. Sometimes, she wondered if the woman she'd been before all this would recognize her now. That principled, isolated analyst who thought she knew the difference between right and wrong. That woman seemed impossibly naive now. Elena had learned that morality wasn't black and white. It was 1,000 shades of gray, and every choice carried consequences you couldn't predict or control. She'd learned that survival sometimes meant compromising everything you believed in. She'd learned that love could grow in the darkest soil, and that made it no less real and no less poisonous. She'd learned that safety had a price. And sometimes that price was becoming someone you hated. Was it worth it? Elena didn't know. Even now, after everything, she couldn't answer that question with certainty. She was alive. She was free. She was wealthy enough to do whatever she wanted with the rest of her life. But she was also hollow, haunted, fundamentally changed in ways that could never be undone. David Chen's children had grown up without their father. The businessman's wife had remarried, started over. The women in Marcus's files had never been found, their families still searching, still hoping. And Elena carried all of them with her. She finished her coffee and stood to leave. Outside, the sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. It was beautiful. Elena wished she could feel that beauty instead of just observing it. Wished she could be present in her own life instead of constantly looking over her shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But she couldn't, because safety hadn't saved her. It had just given her a comfortable place to exist while the person she used to be slowly disappeared. Marcus had been right about one thing. She was a survivor. She just wasn't sure what exactly she'd survived into. As Elena walked back to her apartment, small, secure, anonymous, she thought about the question the prosecutor had asked her during trial preparation. Do you regret marrying him? She'd said yes then because it was the right answer, the expected answer. But the truth was more complicated. She regretted what she'd become, the choices she'd made, the people she'd failed to save. But marry Marcus? In that moment of desperation, with death closing in and no other options visible, she'd do it again. And that, more than anything else, was what kept her awake at night, because it meant that somewhere deep inside, she was still the person Marcus had seen in her all along. Someone who would choose survival over integrity, safety over soul. Someone who could become a monster if the circumstances were right. Elena unlocked her apartment door and stepped inside. The space was nice, well-furnished, empty of any personal touches that might give away who she really was. It felt like a cage, a beautiful, comfortable cage, just like the life she left behind. And as she locked the door behind her, securing the multiple deadbolts that made her feel fractionally safer, Elena wondered if she'd ever truly escaped at all, or if some cages were just roomier than others.